Hey there, everybody. My name is Jeremy Siskind. I am the author of this fantastic book over here. It makes me so happy every time anybody orders one from my website. So I've been thinking a lot about warm-ups lately. I'm getting prepared to record a new album, and so I've been just spending a lot of time trying to get my technique together. And it's occurred to me that you never are done with scales. There's almost nothing as good that you can do for your technique, your ear, your muscle memory, your skills as an improviser, and getting to know your scales in a wide variety of ways. So these are 25, and honestly there's kind of more than 25 when it gets down to it, ways to practice a major scale. Of course, you could apply these to your melodic minor, your harmonic minor, your modes, your harmonic major, your octatonic, a million other kinds of scales. I just thought it was kind of fun to show you some things with your major scales. So, of course, there's no substitute for just playing it up and down in octaves, hands separately, both hands together. This is number one. Don't worry, it's going to get more interesting from here. Okay, I'm going to use the E-flat major scale to demonstrate everything. And by the way, I've written the scales just in 2 octaves just to save space. Usually, just like I did here, scales are played in 4 octaves. And the number one thing before we do anything else is that you should be able to play it up and down with complete evenness and control. And that means both in terms of dynamic evenness, that we're not hearing your thumb every time, we're not hearing right? And it also means rhythmic evenness. One thing that's sometimes helpful for students is that I have them do a glissando. And then I say, that's the way that your arms should move as you're playing a major scale. Of course, your fingers are doing some work as your arm's doing that, but if your arm's doing a chicken leg or a chicken wing kind of a thing, you're doing it wrong. So if you want to know how it feels, play that glissando, and your scale should have that kind of smoothness. Another very standard scale practice technique that a lot of you are familiar with probably is practicing in contrary motion, right? I think a lot of conservatories, universities, and even just kind of preparatory exams have you play your scale up for 2 octaves, contrary motion for 2 octaves, up 2 more, out 2 more. Definitely worth practicing. That was a little stressful to do, but I nailed it, so thank goodness. And then maybe a third thing I would have you do with your scales would be to play them at different dynamics, particularly at soft dynamics. It's so hard to control it at a pianissimo and really listen for evenness. And then try your biggest fortissimo. Some teachers like to have you really practice lifting before each note of the scale to build that finger strength. And then try to shape the scale. Can you make it crescendo on the way up, diminuendo on the way down? And by the way, this isn't one of the ways. I told you you're going to get more than 25, but if you really want to build finger strength, you can practice some repeated notes. Choose your number of repeated notes. That was 3. Try not to get tense. When I try not to get tense, I do this to loosen my elbow. This isn't the chicken wing. This is just kind of release that tension there. Don't forget to breathe. I had a wonderful student who I taught today who did great, but every time he played, he stopped breathing. So don't forget to breathe as you play the scales. But try some different dynamics. What if you crescendoed to the middle and then decrescendo? There's all kinds of fun possibilities. Okay, then I think this is all still kind of standard. Try some different articulations. Try to play whole scale staccato or 2-note slurs. You could try different number of note slurs if you want. And this is a good place to suggest you could try swing rhythm. And I'm always thinking do-va, with a little bit more weight on the second of each eighth note. Right. Speaking of swing rhythm, dotted rhythms are great. This is something that I did with my scales growing up. It's been a little while since I've done it, but it just kind of forces you to play some of it a little bit faster, right? Which challenges your fingers. You can also try what I call the reverse dotted rhythm, where you do 16th note and then dotted 8th. Really good exercise is to practice your scales using just one or two fingers. Sorry, I'll get this into focus the best I can. But for example, you could practice just using your two. And I'm just going to do one hand at a time here so I can really focus. And I'm going to try to make it as legato and smooth as I can. And this really challenges the rest of your body. Since you can't connect with your fingers, you need to connect using your arm and your elbow and every other part of your playing mechanism. So how beautiful can you make that scale? And you could try with some different fingers. Try with your thumb. Wasn't perfect, that's for sure. And do the same thing with your left hand. And then you could try two fingers. What if, especially as improvising musicians, we want to be very flexible with our fingering. So what if you could only use your 3 and your 1? Well, that gets me into some weird positions. Super interesting. What if you could only use your thumb and your pinky? That's going to be really tough. Or what if you could only use these 3 fingers? You can't use your thumb at all. That's kind of fun. All right. I wonder how many people are still with me. We've gotten through 7. It's only going to get more exciting from here. All right. Turning the page, if I may. Next thing, definitely practice different groupings. So I put in 2 different groupings here. This is triplets. This is probably familiar. And I do find that, a lot of students' fingering starts to break down here because you're used to a certain kind of rhythm to the fingering. So by the way, when you practice in the triplets, certainly, just do 3 octaves of the scale so that it's nice and even. I've been obsessed with groups of 5 lately. So you can practice in these groups of 5, and here I would do 5 octaves so that it kind of goes evenly. So 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's really fun. And then try different stop-start rhythms. So this is a very basic one. So this kind of creates groups of 3, or try groups of 4. Or groups of 5. Choose your own adventure, and you can choose different beats to stop on. It could be, or I guess that's the same as that. So play around with some stop-start rhythms. All right, we're up to number 10. Of course, you want to practice starting your scale from different notes. If you're playing the E flat major scale, you want to start from places other than E flat. So here's starting on D. This would be the Locrian mode, if you want to think about it that way, right? Remember, when we start our major scales from different spots, we get our modes. that same spirit, you can start your right hand and left hand from different spots in the scale. And this has really helped me to improvise better in tenths. I've done a lot of this practice in the last few years. So I better not mess that up. In fact, I should be able to show you I've been doing that with the contrary motion. And for all these exercises, you can combine them. The past few weeks I've been starting a fourth apart. Not something I would probably use in my playing a lot, but it just forces my brain to work a little bit. It's like, okay, how well do you really know these scales? And then I tried that in quintuplets just the other day. So you can combine all these exercises if you get bored. And then you can also play them at different rates. So here my right hand is playing triplets, my left hand's playing eighth notes. I think I messed that up. I've also been doing this with fives, and it's actually kind of good for practicing because, like most people, my right hand can play faster and needs a little bit more higher tempo to get a really good workout, to work up a sweat than my left hand does. So I'll play my left hand in fours and my right hand in five. Let's see if I can do this for you. So. Kind of fun. And like I said, if I kind of get going out at a good tempo. Well, it wasn't perfect, but that works out both of my hands pretty well, whereas usually I have to do my right hand at one tempo and my left hand at another. All right, gonna turn the page. Hey, it worked. Cool. Oh, I spoke too soon. Now, scale patterns is kind of a whole subject, that we, in jazz, we want to be able to leap to every note of the scale. So I'm not necessarily going to go in detail over scale patterns, but, I think some things that are non-negotiable in terms of knowing your scales as an improviser versus just being able to play them in every different interval, so thirds. If you don't understand what I'm doing here, I'm skipping one note in the scale. I'm going from E flat to G, right? And then I'm going to the next note of the scale, and I'm skipping one note. And then I'm going to the next note of the scale, skipping one note. So if you look at the bottom notes here, it'll still be doing the scale, but then it's skipping one note up. So you want to do that thirds, fourths, right? Fingering is awful. By the way, that is a question I get a lot is, okay, but what fingering do I use? And I would say that it's probably not the best use of your time to try to lock in a fingering. I would instead make sure that you're not just repeating the same two fingers, and that's why my fingering was bad, because I was like going 2-4, 2-4, 2-4, 2-4. That's not going to be the most efficient use of your hand. So I would make sure that you're using all of your fingers, but as an improviser, you don't want to have just learned one fingering for these sorts of scale patterns. You want to be able to access a bunch of different fingerings depending on where you start, where you're coming from. So I don't think it's really the best use of your time to learn one single finger. Okay, fifths, sixths, sevenths, right, ninths. It's kind of wild. And then you can do multiple intervals. So here I put 2/4 together just to demonstrate. But it could be a triad. Or it could be a seventh chord. It could be a seventh chord in third inversion. If you're wondering, how did you practice all of those things? And the answer is I'm not necessarily certain that I've ever practiced 7th chords in 3rd inversion in E flat major. But I practiced all the component parts a lot, right? I know my E flat major scale so well, and I know 7th chords in their inversion so well that it's not that stressful to try that, even with my enormous Zoom audience, who I'm sure are still all tuned in this video, because it's not long at all. So combine, stack as many intervals as you want. Be as creative as you want. I once took a master class where the great bassist Rufus Reed said that practicing scales is like cooking chicken. As long as you cook it all the way through, as long as you do a good job, it's going to be delicious no matter how you do it. So, come up with your own interval patterns. And then, another kind of principle of scale patterns is to be able to double back, to not just be going straight up. Right? And same thing with your scale patterns. You can leap up and then step down. So once you throw in changing of direction, there's just a million things that you can do. Right, and then you can stack intervals. This is very difficult to play. Thirds are notoriously hard, and I'm probably just going to do one hand at a time, to be honest. So there's thirds stacked, fours, very much improvising this fingering, fifths. Got in there, 6th. One of my favorite intervals. Aren't they pretty? All right, 7ths. You get the picture. So those are what I call diatonic intervals. Diatonic means everything is from the scale. Every note in there is a member of the E flat major scale. So I'm not really thinking about what kind of a third this is, whether it's major or minor. It's just whatever third is present in that E flat major scale. You can also use what I guess I'm referring to here as chromatic intervals. And in this case, I'm going to, I did a bad job on this example. So what I did is I started the scale from the G natural, and then I harmonized beneath that with major thirds. So now some of those harmonized notes are part of the E flat major scale, some of them are not. So all of the top notes are from the E flat major scale, but then I harmonized them all in major thirds, or you could do perfect fourths, which most of them are, except for this one. Which is going to get more interesting in a second. I'll show you how it's going to get more interesting. Of course, you can also stack diatonic triads. You can stack them in inversions. Or 7th chords. This is actually something that I practice quite a bit, and you can't tell from the way that I just did it, but it's really important to me to be able to find chords quickly. So I do this with a metronome, try to find it quickly and accurately. This is a semi-regular part of my warm-up routine. And I also like doing this in contrary motion, because it really forces me to think about hand shape is coming next. And you can also start those in different places. So I could start my left hand from E flat at the bottom, my right hand from G on the bottom. And that forces you to really think about, okay, what is the hand shape in each hand? How can I get to this chord quickly and precisely? Okay, so I told you it was going to get more interesting. I think, we could take those chromatic intervals and make chromatic triads. So now, starting from this E flat, the bottom is playing the E flat major scale, and then I've harmonized each of these with a major chord. So these aren't now going to be all part of the E flat major scale. It's going to be whatever comes stacked. Try all minor chords. You can do that with seventh chord, all dominant seventh chords. Something that I know a lot of jazz musicians practice is playing two different scales in different hands. I haven't practiced this in a while, so I could play my G major scale in the right hand and my E flat major scale in the left hand. This is kind of being bitonal. And again, this really causes you to focus on that hand separation. I messed it up. Not something I practice a lot, but pretty fun to play around with. I gotta do some more of that. And then if you're interested in counterpoint, you want to be practicing with two voices in one hand. It's hard to get this all into this camera shot, but I'm just going to play the right hand anyway because this takes 100% of my focus. So look what's happening. I have two voices in my right hand, and they're kind of trading off. One's doing 16th notes for a beat, the other one's doing 8th notes for a beat. And then trade. And so you got to be really good. Sometimes you are just going to have to use the same finger twice in a row. Sometimes you're not going to get around that. So these are moving in parallel motion. By the way, this is in my book. I've plugged my book already, right? By the time it's in the chapter about contrapuntal approaches. But you can also practice with two hands going in opposing directions. Right. So here the upper voice is just playing the scale. And the lower voice is playing scale fragments going down. Right. So it gets you used to thinking with two voices in one hand. You could also have it with the bottom voice playing the scale, you know. One of the things that we do with modal voicings is that we practice them in scales. Eventually I'll make some sort of a video about modal voicings, but you know, you can take your so what voicing if you're not familiar with the so what voicing, buy my book. But no, it's a stack of fourths with a third on top. Practice our chordal voicing, which is sixth notes, all with a stack of fourths. You know, and we want to practice those in scales as well. I'm kind of obsessed with hemiolas. Hemiola means that you're kind of fitting a number of notes into a measure that don't naturally fit. And so here, we're accenting in these hemiolas. So I'm accenting every third, eighth note. So I'm playing in, you know, it's kind of like the grouping, but here I'm playing still just eighth notes. But I'm playing. Pretty fun. And then I got one last one. We're at number 25, which is feels a little bit anticlimactic, but you can add non-chord tones to the scale. So here in this example, I'm adding an enclosure into each note of the scale. So, it could also be simpler. It could just be a neighbor tone. Could be you're going 2 half steps down. Alright guys, that's it for today. Those are 25, well, really kind of way more than 25 ways to practice your major scale. But remember, no matter how you practice it, the important thing is evenness. Evenness of dynamics, no unintended accents, and then evenness of rhythm. Make sure that it's really clockwork precise. If you've made it to the end of this video, congrats. Send me a comment. Let me know that you made it because I'm impressed. This was a long one with a lot of E flat major scale, but I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe, stay tuned, and I'll see y'all soon.